Welcome to Legal Aid of Northwest Texas and the Community Revitalization Project. Legal Aid of Northwest Texas is a nonprofit law firm that provides free civil legal services to low-income individuals, families, and groups who qualify for services. The Community Revitalization Project is one of the projects within Legal Aid that provides legal help to low-income individuals and groups and focuses on three basic areas: housing justice, environmental justice, and community development. Legal Aid of Northwest Texas works to advance and protect the rights of millions of low-income people by providing free civil legal assistance to ensure equal access to justice. Our nonprofit coaching team is now happy to present to you our latest project, which is the 501c3 course of classes to support community groups in maintaining tax-exempt compliance. Thank you for joining us.
We want to thank everyone for being here. We usually start around 6:05, so I'm grateful to all of you who make an effort to be here ahead of time. We allowed till 6:05 so that some of our attendees can get settled, because we know everybody that comes to these meetings is very busy. So we always say we value your time, and we'll start promptly at 6:05, and as soon as all the information is disseminated and all of the questions are responded to, we will be letting you go back to your normal scheduled life.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is our class for 501c3 organizations, and I'm with Legal Aid of Northwest Texas. It's a nonprofit law firm. We work in about 114 counties in North Texas and in West Texas. And myself and Eleazar and a couple of other folks on the call are with a project of Legal Aid of Northwest Texas called the Community Revitalization Project. And we focus our work in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, as well as Lubbock and Amarillo. And a key part of what we try to do is work with community-based organizations and specifically around capacity building. So we're very happy to be with you tonight, and we're going to discuss this evening grant writing and fundraising with a little bit of discussion on reporting requirements or reporting capacity. We have an example of a live grant that we want to just show you for discussion purposes. And we also want to talk with you tonight about a type of exercise that a nonprofit can do called a SWOT analysis, where you look at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that's a way just to help you, to help guide your work. And Eleazar here is going to introduce us to the grant writing process, the big picture.
Very well. Thank you, Nancy. I would like to prefix everything by saying that most people who have never written a grant or reported on a grant have their basic need is to understand what the process is. Some people think there is a grant opportunity. If I could just write a grant and I can get the money, everything will be fine. However, prior to acquiring a grant, there have to be certain things that are preset in a nonprofit and even a for-profit situation. But focusing on nonprofit situations, when the nonprofit can pull out a report that indicates where their funding has come from, where their funding has gone, who has done what, how many people have been serviced, and they're able to pull that information, that is the type of level of reporting that you need to be what I call grant worthy, which means individuals who work in foundations or state agencies or any type of funding entity are very aware of what the needs are of the community, what is needed to be spent in what areas, particularly since they are telling us, we want you to focus on, education, or let's say providing food or shelter, whatever it is that they're asking, that they're saying that they can grant you money for. They understand that concept. They understand what the needs are going to be. And so what needs to happen is that whoever is looking to write a grant needs to understand the process. And for that, I've just prefixed, you need to have your ducks in a row internally. Your step one is you get a grant. Somebody usually comes up with a grant and it sounds exciting. First thing you need to do is to read the instructions. When you read the instructions, you're going to find out whether this is a grant that is something you can get because it matches with your purpose and your mission and your vision. So you understand that there is something that in there that you could do and show that if they give you the money, you can further the grantor's purpose. They give you a deadline. They tell you about how much you can ask for, and the instructions tell you how they want to be approached. It could be a letter of interest where the grantor, and I just ran into this one grantor who wants a letter of interest sent to them via United States mail. They don't want any email. They don't want any phone calls. They don't want any faxes. So you read the instructions and you know exactly how these people want to be approached. And so step two is you look at yourself and you say, yes, we are able to do this work. We are actually doing it. We have documentation. We forget this money. We're able to do X, Y, Z, and it's within the parameters that they gave us in the instructions. So you collect all the data and you begin to move. You look to understand and answer whatever their questions are. Not the question that you think that they're asking you. If they're asking you, what is the percentage of Blacks, Latinos, Asian in your community, don't just focus on something other than giving them, this is the specific area that we are serving, which matches the percentage that you are looking for. They want specific numbers. You give them specific numbers and you answer the questions that they're asking you. So it's always important, I always say, to understand that when you respond to their questions, you need to be answering the right question, not the one that's in your head, but they are giving you some words that you could respond to them in kind. Use the words from the question to rephrase the answer. And that's in all of the responses for all of the grant questions. So step 4 is you prepare a convincing program if you don't have one. It's very difficult to prepare a program out of the blue. It's possible. I've had the experience of working with a really great idea. And before the entity was even 501c3, we worked on putting together this program that actually got funded by an agency in the state of Pennsylvania when I used to work there, when I used to live there. But what I'm trying to say is you need to prepare a program that will convince anyone that this thing will work. And I always say it's all in the presentation. You also need to be very good with your financial narrative responses. The financial part of the organization basically will tell the entity whether you understand all that your expenses would entail for a type of service that you would be providing. The entity that is looking at your grant, when they look at, let's say they are looking at a letter of interest. A letter of interest is basically a 1 to 2 page document that you send to this organization and you say, this is who we are. We found out about your grant to support this situation. So we match that because we do this, have been doing it for so long. Now we are able to do more along these areas if you would help us with this amount of money. And this amount of money is going to be used in this manner. So what ends up happening is that you need to have a smart idea that is easily understandable, doable. You're able to quantify it and you're able to say, if we can get this money, we can increase or we can improve or add a different wing to whatever it is that we're doing. But it needs to be something that sounds convincing. the people that are reading the grants they can tell they have an X-ray vision to see whether you have the capacity to set up with the money that they're going to give you. Now, once you have really an amazing program that is easy to understand, simple wording, you have a really good budget that makes sense. And the question that I've been asked recently has been, well, how much can I ask for? Generally, I look at it from the perspective of a bank loans officer. If you can show me that you can handle $10,000, then I believe that I could risk $2,000 to you. So that's the way that in my mind, how I justify putting together a budget that matches. So a budget that matches is if you make $50,000 in revenue, then $10,000 will be about 20%. I'm not good at math, but I think that would be right. And so you're able to then justify how the money that you bring, because of everything else that you have in place, you're going to be able to use the funding and acquire the goal that you have told them that you're going to do. So when you have your program narrative, your painted pictures with your words, you have a convincing idea that should work, you have a budget with a financial description that makes sense, that shows that, I always say, that shows that you're trying to squeeze 5 cents out of every nickel. You put all that together and then you review this document, this grant. You just keep reading it. The more money you want, the larger it's going to be. So a letter of interest, it should be very quick, in 1.5 pages, 2 pages at most. But if you're looking for $20,000, then you have more like 20 pages with some attachments. So the idea is that once you have this grant, that you've understood from the beginning what it is that they're looking for, that you are able to produce what they're asking for, you're able to report on the money that you received without a problem. You review this thing, you review it, you give it to somebody else to tell you, are we missing anything? Are there any typos? Is there something that we don't have? Is there something that could make it better? Review, and then you finally send it. Now you do this process and you do it not once, not twice. This has to become a process within the organization. Otherwise, you're going to go into a grant writing situation. You're going to write 3 grants. You're going to send them out. None of them panned out, but you didn't follow through with making your grant better. Then it died. Once you begin a grant writing process for an organization, as long as the organization is alive, you should maintain the writing of the grants, because it'll help the organization go forward faster.
The next slide just describes different sources of funding, and very big picture here, we're just looking at how funding and grants can come from the private sector, from corporations that have their own corporate social philanthropy programs. For example, we'll use an example in a minute of a corporate grant that we're familiar with. The public sector, right? Various governments at various levels also provide funding to nonprofits, including at the local level. An example in Fort Worth, where I am, the city of Fort Worth will make its community development block grant funds available to nonprofits that have specific types of programs that serve low income communities. Another example of a local grant in Fort Worth is that the police department allocates a portion of its dedicated sales tax revenue to community programs. And so to access these types of grants, it's best to be on the, to receive notice from the sponsoring department about the upcoming call for proposals. The nonprofit sector or foundations, kind of the broader philanthropic sector, I think people are familiar with. You can have family foundations as well as community foundations, but a range of grant-making institutions that all administer their grants independently, right? The private sector, going back to the private sector, you have corporate social philanthropy. Sometimes a corporation will establish its own foundation, right? An example of this, a bank, for example, Wells Fargo is a bank, it's a corporation, but it also has its Wells Fargo Foundation. And one of the reasons we want to bring up banks is because banks not only will have their own corporate social philanthropy programs, but they may also have an interest in supporting community-based organizations under the Community Reinvestment Act. And that can be for community-based organizations that have a focus on affordable housing or small business lending or access to credit programs, but kind of broadly defined as community development, which often means building multifamily housing in the sort of lending space. But this is an example of a live grant that we want to bring to your attention. This is specifically for community-based organizations that have a focus on affordable housing and small business lending. And this is sponsored by a regional bank cooperative called the Federal Home Loan Bank Dallas, which is a membership cooperative of banks in the Texas area as well as in the neighboring states. And so they have this annual program. This year goes until June 30th. And the key aspects here is that this entity provides a matching grant. So if you have a bank that you work with that wants to submit an application on your behalf, if you are successful, this other entity provides a matching grant. So the bank that you're talking with would have to provide you with some type of financial commitment. Let's say it's $1,000. Those $1,000 can be leveraged to access $4,000 from the Federal Home Loan Bank. What I really want to bring your attention to on this slide is the list of accompanying documents that they ask for. In addition to the grant application, they ask for these types of documents. An IRS 990 EZ or N statement as a way to get your annual tax filing, your total projected revenue, a description of your received funds, anticipated funds, in-kind sources, in-kind revenue. And here they're asking for that because they're trying to make this grant only eligible to smaller community-based organizations that have a budget below $600,000, right? But it's still to show on paper what kinds of activities you currently have. And having that type of description of your total projected revenue is a way to see that. Your IRS determination letter, right, to see that you're a 501c3 type organization. And then these other items. Member bank must provide an initial grant to the community-based organization or a commitment letter on the bank's letterhead. And then the application, I think it's about a 4-page application that is prepared and submitted by the member bank, right? But you would work with the member bank to provide the narrative. And if you're interested in this annual grant program, there is information on the Federal Home Loan Bank Dallas website. You can also search for member banks as a way to know more about who's participated in this program in the past. But I will just say this is the types of banks that are member banks are typically community banks. So not small banks, but smaller banks. Frost Bank Comerica Bank. These are examples of member banks. They do ask for some reporting requirements. The maximum amount you can get from this matching grant a year is $24,000. It has a lifetime cap of $60,000. So it's kind of small dollars that are really geared towards organizational capacity building. And the types of questions they ask, in previous years, they've asked these 4 questions. How did you use the funds to support your organizational capacity building? Did this funding help you produce or implement or develop any activities? Number 3, bank partnerships. Did this grant help you access other Federal Home Loan Bank Dallas programs related to affordable housing or small business lending or community development? So they're interested in, did this grant build relationships between community-based organizations and member banks? Did the grant help you leverage any state, local, federal programs? And this is the idea of kind of diversifying resources, right? Can an organization do more with different resources or have more sustainability long-term with more diverse revenue streams? And I think the sponsor probably thinks the answer is yes. So here we have, in the next slide, we want to show this to you because we worked with an organization in Fort Worth that already had a relationship with a bank. A colleague of theirs introduced them to a local bank, Texas Bank Financial, and the bank had decided that it wanted to support this new community-based organization's efforts in Fort Worth. Over time, that colleague learned or shared with us information about this Federal Home Loan Bank Dallas matching grant. And as a result, we realized the organization that we work with had already met all of the minimum requirements. Most importantly, that they had received a financial commitment from a member bank. And so after that, it was realizing, well, we just need to make sure they have the paperwork, not a lot of heavy lifting, but the type of paperwork they would already need to have. Their IRS determination letter, their IRS 990, a required annual tax filing for nonprofits to stay in good compliance, total projected revenue, something that they could easily put down on paper. So the good positive aspect of this was that they were able to get the member bank to submit the application, and they were able to leverage, that initial gift to receive $12,000 from the Federal Home Loan Bank. And this grant in particular, they call it a lottery style, meaning it's really just a draw based on what resources are available and the applications that come in. There isn't necessarily a lengthy review of the grant narrative or grant application, which is unique, I think, to this grant. But again, it's an example of how, there are different funding sources, and it also makes, this grant in particular makes me think about how community-based organizations may want to include banks as part of their development strategy in terms of building relationships, or if you're looking at expanding your board or creating a development committee that has a focus on raising funding for the organization, how banks can potentially be a partner to those efforts. I'll let you continue, please.
Okay. We're going to speak about 4 grant components. I would like to open the floor to ask you some general questions. First, let me say about your program budget. Your program budget is a smaller budget that is contained within your organizational budget. Your program budget could contain the same aspects or the same numbers for your rent or your utilities. The main thing with this developing your program budget is that you cover the items that the grantor is saying that they will pay. If they're saying we're not going to pay for salaries, don't tell them that you like the money so that you can get salary. You could have the best reason for needing to pay a salaried person, but if they are not providing that benefit in their offering, your program budget needs to match what they're asking for. So I just wanted to ask, there's several of you out there who have been with us for a long time. Our classes since we started, there's some new ones. I'd like to ask some of the new individuals, and then I'll just put it down to the ones, so those of you who've been with us for years now. What is the smartest thing to do you think, when you're preparing your grant budget? What do you look at? What is the smartest thing that you could do when you're putting together your budget program?
Well, I mean, I own a catering business, so one of the things that I think about is the equipment that I'll need as far as for permits, or what's going to be so I can cook my food, the type of equipment that I need, whether it's grills, cost of my supplies, food, so on and so forth. So those are some of the things that I would think of when I'm requesting a grant, as far as when they ask me, well, what is the money going to be used for? I think you said if they're not looking to see about paying off salaries, unless that's something that's not been covered, then I'm going to think about what have I been paying for out of pocket that I can use this money for to move forward or to build the business. So I don't have to come out of my pocket and go into personal debt trying to build for my business.
Thank you. No, I appreciate your segueing from what we were just discussing. So the most important thing for you qualify and you quantify. You're qualifying what parts of the budget you should be augmenting for the grant, and you're qualifying them and saying, yes, this is what you want, then this goes. And so in that situation, the smartest thing that you can do definitely is to qualify and quantify. But it sounds like you already have been through this process, which is the one thing that I would say is the smartest thing that you could do when you're preparing your budget, which is you need to start working on it now. If you do not know the things that you need, if you're not aware of, you are going to be providing a type of service that an entity is used to covering, and you do not cover an expense that is very glaring that you're missing, you want to put into that list of all of your budget line items all of the things that should go there. So definitely go with what Mr. Bryant said. Qualify and quantify. That's how I am taking it. He qualified the expenses and he quantified them. And do not leave your budget for the last thing. The budget should actually be something that has been discussed. The organization should have an amount that it calls its operating budget, which is all of the funding that they expect that will be coming in and will be going out in the year. That's your operating budget. Within that, you have a program or programs budget. You'd have more than one. Let's say you have one specific program that you want to launch, then you qualify, quantify, and you explain, and you start working on it right now, why this money is needed and where it's going to be expended. The second item, we wanted to address fundraising, because normally when an individual has the responsibility of working with a 501c3, they don't realize that there are certain things that need to be a part of the organization in order for it to be successful in grant writing. And one of these things is fundraising. When you're telling an entity that is looking to provide you with $10,000, $20,000, when you're telling them where do you get your money to sustain yourselves, you want to be able to showcase the fact that, yes, we need this money to do this grant, but with the money that we are receiving, and we're receiving this money through this fundraising initiative, this other fundraising initiative, and you explain that you have ways of running funding streams, issuing funding streams, trying to figure out whether it's, let's say, churches are famous for this because they're able to do bake sales and things like that. And that's fine. But when you are putting together a fundraiser that is going to complement something you're going to do, let's say in December, and you begin to use social media, you begin to use all the resources that you have, and you put together a plan and a project. And then you indicate, if we start doing these things from now by December, we should have enough money to do Y or Z. The point on the fundraising is, if you don't have a smart fundraising initiative, you're cutting away positive points from a grant application. The people want to see that not only that you do need this money, but you're not going to collapse if you don't get the money. If they have a sense that that's going to happen, then they'll look at you differently. And if what they're giving money for is to make you sustainable, that could work. But if the money that they're giving you is for something different, your sustainability comes into question if you do not show that you are able to move money not only in fundraising, but Nancy was mentioning before, in kind. If somebody, an accountant, a lawyer, a professional in their field, a person that does websites, person that does IT, or anything electronic that you do need to have expertise to do that, you're actually able to get the work done for free and receive a credit in the number of revenue that you received. For instance, an attorney provides $30,000 worth of his or her time to fix something that a nonprofit had a problem with. The attorney signs this document called an in-kind receipt. Those in-kind receipts are the same as cash for the nonprofit. They're able to say $3,000 came in because they didn't have to pay it out, and they have the documentation in the in-kind receipt, which we have templates of those for everybody. So on the fundraising, it's a lot into that I want to make sure that everybody that is looking into having a grant writing initiative, that they understand that it's the grant writing initiative basically showcases the entire entity. And if you have flaws in the way that the entity is doing something, for instance, no fundraising, we're donating all our money, all our time, but we don't really do any fundraising because we don't have time. But if you give us these $20,000, we'll be able to do X, Y, Z. That might not work, because you need to show that you are also looking for contributing sources, other income streams, so that they can say, yes, this is a good place to invest the funding, because we should be able to promote good success. So the question on number 2, so that I can finally move on, is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much priority are you giving to raising funds program? It should be to a fundraising program. How much priority up until today have you given to running a fundraising program? The question is, how much priority are you giving your fundraising program? When you're doing your grant writing, are you doing fundraising as well? Are you giving that the same priority you're giving to getting a grant?
I mean, to be honest with you, I'm asking for the grant. And so while I can't get the grant, I got to fundraise so I can keep my business going. So, I mean, I definitely give it a whole lot of, but we give back to the community too. So that's a big part of our business is the fundraising. But when it comes to my business, yeah, like I said, I'm not trying to pay for everything out of pocket like I have been. So fundraising is at the top of the list until we get the grant. I am on a board with a non-profit who does mentorship, which is why, I mean, I keep speaking from a for-profit, but also do nonprofit work as well. The fundraising part, when it comes to the nonprofit, that's 100%. I mean, when we gotta find contributors and investors who want to get these programs to go, like the mentorship that we have for our youth, or feeding the homeless, we have to have fundraising, because that's where the majority of that money is coming from. So it's at the very top of the list when it comes with the nonprofit side, because I mean, with the nonprofit, we're not doing this for anything but to give back. So yeah,
Thank you.
I hope I answered the question on that.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I wanted to end with the point, all of this has been for you to remember that fundraising produces revenue as well as expenses. So you need to document how much money it cost you to raise the funds. And that's a number that goes in your taxes, but you should also keep track of that in general, so that if you invested $1,500 and you only raised 1,000, I'm sorry, then there's a problem. So the idea is, again, to squeeze 6 cents out of every nickel. And fundraising is basically getting individuals engaged in what you're doing, getting them all fired up, and giving them a little piece of something that weighs something, so that everybody is carrying a little bit of the weight to provide the funding internally. So fundraising needs to be on the top priority. I would say we do not maintain, or we do not support the people that do fundraising. We don't value them. The people who are able to, or who do the work of fundraising for an entity, it's almost like, oh, that's their job. But fundraising is very hard. If you have somebody who has a heart and a skill for that, do your best to treat them well. That's all I'm going to say on that one. So income streams. Now, income streams are basically just different things. You could have, a GoFundMe for something, for some work that you want to get done. You could have a group of 20 people who are donating $10 a month, so that you can have $200, and in 6 months, and you can have $1,200 for something. You could have a promise kind of thing, but nonprofits are very good with this. When a nonprofit receives what's known as a pledge, that is something that you can go to the bank with. So if I write you a receipt that says that I will be providing you, or giving you, or paying by the end of this year $1,000, then you can actually use that as money in the bank. You can actually take me to court if I don't pay you, because any kind of pledge that you provide in that manner is enforceable. So people tend to like to showcase a lot of speaking, and when the time comes for the money part, that doesn't show up. But when you're pledging nonprofit, it's very, very different. I mean, if I promise you I'm gonna give you $10 and I don't give it to you, that's one thing. But if I pledge to you that I'm going to provide you that same $10, that has weight. So that's an income stream. So the question in general for everybody would be, why would a charity need diversity in income streams, right? If you have one thing that you do that brings income, why should you look to have more than just one thing that brings income to your organization?
It's the same as diversifying your portfolio with your nonprofit or your for-profit. I believe with any kind of business, you probably need about 5 streams of income. And so having multiple streams, some streams the water might slow up, and another stream the water might overflow, and another one might be dammed. It might be a drought over here, and so streams of income is like the weather. Uh, Different things happen, so at least one of them would always be flowing if another one's.
Thank you for that. That's very clear. I have nothing else to add to that. And since I want to make sure that I complete this within a reasonable amount of time, I'm just going to go into sustainability. I know, Marcus, you have been succeeding in sustainability. While I have you here, I want to ask, would you say that a grantor is more interested in the sustainability of your program than in the benefit that your program provides?
And all I was saying is both, that your sustainability and your purpose and how you're affecting the community go hand in hand. And so I would say that's what grantors are looking for. Last year we got a grant from Social Wise and Mark Cuban. Very good grant. It ran out after the year was over with. And so sometimes the grantors that grant you aren't sustainable. That's another thing. And so when you're dealing with some organizations, they have that money. You got to make sure that, especially with the social wise grant, because they didn't actually give us the money, but they would pay our volunteers all over the city. And so I knew that I needed to get as many people paid, as many people jobs, as many gardens to be built, schools to be open. I diversified how that money was spent because I understood that nonprofits like theirs don't last a long time. They're not very sustainable when they're giving out money like that. And so a lot of times you got to understand what kind of grantors you're dealing with too.
Thank you, Marcus. That was really good. I'm just going to move it ahead relatively quickly. I do have Dion Primo from Daughters Across the Diaspora, who actually had to leave, but she did tell me that there's a couple of the daughters on the call. So I wanted to feel welcome to respond. I have a couple more questions to ask. Before I go into those, which is going to be teaching you how to do a self-assessment of your organization. We're going to do a simplified version of it, but I just wanted to say that your grant application should present information on contingency, meaning you should have a play in the event that they do not receive this grant money. So you should indicate to them, we with this money we'll be able to do all these things. Without this money, we will only be able to accomplish, a fourth of what we'll be able to accomplish. So we'll continue with this regardless of whether you give us the money or not. But we are going to be able to do less if you do not support us. So you kind of like give them that kind of a contingency mentality, so that they know we're not dying for the money. We might be dying for the money, but we don't tell them that. We just say, if you don't give us the money, it's okay. We just won't be able to do this great good. Our great good is going to be diminished by. And then the next question is, after the grant stops, how will the money ending prevent any additional help to the people that they wanted to benefit in the very beginning? Meaning, once the money ends, will this benefit continue in any kind of form? And so you explain, depending on your program, what it is that you do. So I'm going to go to this. This is going to be a very simple and very quick exercise. I just want to make sure that everybody has an idea as to your organization has strengths, it has weaknesses, it has opportunities, and it has threats. Generally, the executive director of an organization, or a person who's working closely with the person who's making everything happen, is able to understand these concepts. But the organization should internally evaluate itself. So if I were to ask you to give me one of your organization's strengths or weaknesses or opportunities or threats, that doesn't mean that if you pick the weaknesses of your organization, that you should only talk about the strengths, or if you only speak about the threats, that maybe you should only speak about opportunities. No, you need to understand all of these things, because they're all affecting your organization. And if you're not aware of them, then you are missing out. So I just have 4 small questions. I would like for particularly the people who haven't contributed today, just let us hear your voice. Let us know what you think. There's no wrong answer, but if you were speaking about your organization, you can say who your organization is or not, but I'm going to ask you to say at least one of these things. You are self-evaluating. So you can say, what is the biggest strength that your organization has, or what is the biggest weakness that you're battling to get strong, or what opportunities are there, or what threats. And so I would like for you to speak to us about those things so that we can talk about how you are evaluating your organization. Okay, so I'm going to just pick up my guys that have been here forever and have been working with the nonprofits. Rose, what is one of the greatest strengths of your organization?
Working together as a team. We work well together as a team. Everybody comes up with whatever we need to succeed in whatever we're trying to do. But that also, as I see that has also created a weakness for us too, because we're so well at that, then we don't seek to find grants as often as we should.
Okay, because you're doing all this internal work, you're not developing time to develop
Yeah.
an internal grant writing initiative that can propel you faster or forward further. I
Yes.
see. I can see that. That's smart to think that way. So you talk to your board and let them know that we had this conversation in this
Yes.
class.
I was gonna say, this is Regine. And I was gonna say, I have a lot of opportunities, but my weakness is I don't have the support. So I don't have a board that has come to fruition as far as the skill sets that this organization is looking. So you're working solo or with 2 or 3 people sometimes that can make a presence. They have the heart to help, but they don't have the availability. And I just don't have that. That's my weakness, where I need that the team to be consistent. But opportunities are presenting itself where people are saying, I want to volunteer, or I like, or can you, are you interested in giving this out through your organization or participating or partnering with us? And that's there, but then I can't be everywhere at one time. That's my
Very
story,
good.
and I'm sticking to.
Thank you, Regine. And it's good that you're able to see that it's what your weakness is, but that the opportunities are there, because that allows you to look beyond what you see, as with the Simba movie. I'm going to ask anybody else who'd like to share on opportunities or threats that you see for your organization.
This is Jonathan with Generation Uplift. Your documentation, and the way you document things can be a strength or a weakness, an opportunity or a threat. Um, and that's just what I've been learning of how to. It's better to document it and record it, or write it down, than not to, and then and also to figure out a way to upload that information and make it accessible to the team, so that those people who need certain information can use it, and not only will the team benefit, but the people that you service will have a high quality of service. And so that's been one of the things that I've noticed from uh, taking this training and working with other community partners in the field, and just in this environment of this hybrid environment of documentation. So you could stress that to your peers and your cohorts. You know what I'm saying? Making sure that we document everything, creating minutes for the simple meetings, simple thing, and then it takes it to another level versus just being an informal water cooler. Um, we said we was gonna do this, and if you put certain practices with it, then it becomes efficiency.
Thank you, Jonathan. Well said. I think, Marcus, were you going to say something, or somebody else was going to say something? Sorry, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. All right. So I'm going to just ask anybody else, any one other person who has anything they want to share with regards to their awareness or their evaluation of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, or threats that their organization is facing. Just anything along those fields.
Commissary is very necessary. Right now, our strength is documentation. Our weakness is not being strong in the past on documentation and playing catch up now.
All right, we're running out on the hour. I'm going to just open it in case anybody has any specific question.
Mr. Liaison.
Yes.
Hi, good night. My name is Christina Hughes. I'm the Deputy Director of Daughters from Diaspora.
Hi, thank you for
I just want to quickly answer the questions that you have. Daughters Across the Diaspora is a nonprofit organization that help women of color to become entrepreneurs. And our strength, we was in this organization, we built and developed daughters in a year, going on 2 years. And our strength now is that the young ladies who built daughters have the same goal, and we working very hard. We have the same mindset to work very hard to make daughters successful. So we moving forward, trying to get our business out there and help other women of color to develop their own business. The other question is, we in the process of learning, so I don't think that we don't foresee any threats at this time, but we are building, becoming stronger, so we in the learning process. So our strengths are just learning and getting out there as a nonprofit organization and being successful.
Thank you. I really appreciate your input. Thank you for bringing all that in. It was very enlightening because I am learning what it is that you're doing. You put it very succinctly, and I appreciate that. So it is 7:01. Nancy, if you will just introduce or speak of the team, and then we will let everybody go.
Okay. We usually have Sam Prince, our Director of Development, with us. He's not with us this evening. I'm a staff attorney in our Fort Worth office. Rosetta Howard Jackson is also part of our team. She's absent tonight. Eleazar Velez, who all of you know, I believe, is a paralegal, excuse me, Eleazar.
Oh.
Emily Weiskopf is in our Dallas office. She's joining us tonight. Marcus Bramer is a legal secretary in Fort Worth, and he is not with us, but we all work together, and we certainly look forward to these workshops, and are really glad to have you with us tonight.
This is the conclusion of this session intended to instill capacity into grassroots nonprofits. The nonprofit coaching team would like to thank you for your presence and participation. We look forward to sharing with you in our next class.